Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the press release on the judgment on ESV Australia by the European Courts of Human Rights, and I will read it out and let it out. Alright, in today's chamber judgment, in the case of ESV Australia, God damn it, that might happen a couple of times, but I don't really care. In today's chamber judgment, in the case of ESV Austria application number 38450-12, the European Court of Human Rights held unanimously that there had been no violation of Article 10, freedom of expression, of the European Convention on Human Rights, to show you just what that piece of paper is worth. The case concerned the applicant's conviction for disparaging religious doctrines. She had made statements suggesting that Muhammad had pedophilic tendencies. My. The court found in particular that the domestic courts comprehensively assessed the wider context of the applicant's statements and carefully balanced her right to freedom of expression with the rights of others to have their religious feelings protected, and served the legitimate aim of preserving religious peace in Austria. It held that by considering the impugned statements as going beyond the permissible limits of an objective debate, and by classifying them as an abusive attack on the Prophet of Islam, which could stir up prejudice and threaten religious peace, the domestic courts put forward relevant and sufficient reasons. That's the long and short of it. But before I'm going to get into my main bitching about this, let's continue a little bit before I spew all my ire before we get to the real juicy shit. On which count, the actual really juicy shit isn't even in this document, but you know, we'll get to that later. So, principal facts. The applicant ES is an Austrian national who was born in 1971 and lives in Vienna, Austria. In October and November 2009, Mrs. S held 2 seminars entitled Basic Information on Islam, in which she discussed a marriage between the Prophet Muhammad and a 6-year-old girl, Aisha, which allegedly was consummated when she was 9. Inter alia, the applicant stated that Muhammad liked to do it with children, and a 56-year-old and a 6-year-old, what we call that if it is not pedophilia. On 15th of February 2011, the Vienna Regional Criminal Court found that these statements implied that Muhammad had pedophilic tendencies and convicted Mrs. S for disparaging religious doctrines. She was ordered to pay a fine of 480 euros and the cost of the proceedings. Mrs. S appealed, but the Vienna Court of Appeal upheld the decision in December 2011, confirming in essence the lower court's findings. A request for the renewal of the proceedings was dismissed by the Supreme Court on the 11th of December 2013. So, a woman held a seminar, is what we're told, on the basic information on Islam, and at this point she mentioned and made some statements in regards to the well-known and well-documented and accepted fact that Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6 years old, and the fact that the marriage was consummated when she was 9, which is also an accepted fact, at the very least for the lower boundary of Aisha's age, for as far as this is supposed to actually matter, because we go from a jump in November and October of 2009 of this woman holding her seminars. All of a sudden, we jump to a court decision from the Vienna Regional Criminal Court. So they don't really go into any extra detail on what exactly happened there. For the full scoop on that, you have to go to the actual full judgment, where they give you some other relevant facts. I'm, however, not going to spoil that just yet. So, she tried to appeal, was denied. Well, okay, she was she appealed, but she wasn't denied her appeal. The decision was just upheld, and then she requested the renewal of the proceedings, which was denied, well dismissed. And then we're going to go on to complaints procedure and composition of the court. So, relying on Article 10, freedom of expression, Mrs. S complained that the domestic courts failed to address the substance of the impugned statements in the light of her right to freedom of expression. If they had done so, they would not have qualified them as mere value judgments, but as value judgments based on facts. Furthermore, her criticism of Islam occurred in the framework of an objective and lively discussion which contributed to a public debate and had not been aimed at defaming the Prophet of Islam. Lastly, Mrs. S submitted that religious groups had to tolerate even severe criticism. The application was lodged with the European Court of Human Rights on the 6th of June 2012. Judgment was given by a chamber of 7 judgments, composed as follows. So that took 6 years plus. Over 6 years that took, with these 7 people as judges who came to the unanimous conclusion that sure, it's fine to fine this woman. It's not about the fine, it's about the fact that this woman was convicted in front of a criminal court for the very crime that she was committed for, with the disparaging religious doctrines. It's just so goddamn absurd. And as we'll see later, at a later time in the actual judgment on the case, the European Court of Human Rights actually goes into how principled statements have been made and are made in, for instance, the European Convention on Human Rights against blasphemy laws and how they are completely unacceptable. And then they uphold the decision by the Austrian court, which is basically just a blasphemy law and the application of a goddamn blasphemy law. Also, the reverent tone, and this is going to proceed and continue and get more notable, that's taken with the Prophet of Islam seems to me to be something that's also wholly out of place in a document like this. We're going to return to this little bit right here at a later time, near the end probably. So, decision of the court, Article 10. The court noted that those who choose to exercise the freedom to manifest their religion under Article 9 of the Convention could not expect to be exempt from criticism. Article 9 is the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. They must tolerate and accept the denial by others of their religious belief. Only where expressions under Article 10 went beyond the limits of a critical denial, and certainly where they were likely to incite religious intolerance, might a state legitimately consider them to be incompatible with respect for the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, and take proportionate restrictive measures. So, if you go beyond the limits of critical denial, and I mean, it's not clear to me how they interpret this term. I know I'm pretty damn sure that it's not a wholly defined legal term, but it's critical denial. So, that's the thing, pointing out, or like for instance, if the Bible said that Jesus, after his miracles to recharge, had to rape an 8-year-old, then if it were pointed out by people, look, your prophet and Messiah raped 8-year-olds, that's not critical denial. It's not even a judgment of value based on fact or otherwise. And all right, so they're adding the extra caveat here where they're likely to incite religious intolerance, but what's that mean and in whom? So if I say something that makes other people intolerant of me, because they're a bunch of assholes who can't take a goddamn joke or a comment or whatever, then my freedom of speech should be curtailed. I should be held criminally liable for pissing them off to a degree that would cause them to break the law towards me. That seems pretty strange, you know? The court observed also that the subject matter of the instant case was of a particularly sensitive nature, and that the potential effects of the impugned statements to a certain degree dependent on the situation in the respective country where the statements were made at the time and the context they were made. Accordingly, it considered that the domestic authorities had a wide margin of appreciation in the instant case, as they were in a better position to evaluate which statements were likely to disturb the religious peace in their country. So, these statements were of a particularly sensitive nature. The potential effects of these statements were, highly context dependent. And so they're like, yeah, that gives us a reason to give the Austrian government a wide leash, and we see no way in which they abused this or anything at all. They had a wide margin of appreciation, as they were in a better position to evaluate which statements were likely to disturb the religious peace in their country. So that's the nomer, right? Apparently, that they're going to use right now. That's the measure that they're going to use to curtail your freedom of speech. Are your statements likely to disturb the religious peace in your country? And that in and of itself is bad enough. But the question is, what's the next thing? I mean, political unity? Oh, I mean, replace that. And it considered the domestic authorities had a wide margin of appreciation in the instant cases. They were in a better position to evaluate which statements were likely to disturb the political unity in their country, or the social stability. It's the same fucking thing. Religious peace, social stability. It's absolutely ridiculous. And this was brought out by people who are just massive wastes of resources. The time that was spent to train these people has been put to no use but to waste people's goddamn times and fuck up or fuck with our liberal societies. All the money that they're being paid right now is wasted because what the hell are these people doing? I mean, how many hands has this document been through? The court proceedings, how many people were involved in that? How many judges and secretaries and... Alright, so the court reiterated that it has distinguished in its case law between statements of fact and value judgments. It emphasized that the truth of value judgment was not susceptible to proof. However, value judgment without any factual basis to support it might be excessive. Which is once again completely irrelevant to the entire goddamn situation. That's just, why is this here? What does that tell us? Not a goddamn thing. Alright, so moving on then. The court noted the domestic courts comprehensively explained why they considered the applicant's statement had been capable of rousing justified indignation. Specifically, they had not been made in an objective manner, contributing to debate of public interest, for instance on child marriage, but could only be understood as having been aimed at demonstrating that Muhammad was not worthy of worship. It agreed with the domestic courts that Mrs. S. must have been aware that her statements were partly based on untrue facts and apt to arouse indignation in others. The national courts found that Mrs. S. had subjectively labeled Muhammad pedophilia as his general sexual preference, and that she failed to neutrally inform her audience of the historical background, which consequently did not allow for a serious debate on that issue. Hence, the court saw no reason to depart from the domestic court's qualification of the impugned statements as value judgments, which they had based on a detailed analysis of the statements made. So, because they are choosing to twist her words and interpret her words in a certain way, and are saying that she couldn't have meant it in any other way, it couldn't have meant any other thing, that the courts, that's what the Austrian court said, and that's what the European Court of Human Rights apparently agrees with. Before anybody starts reading, apparently the definition of facts that they're using here is one that is in use but is kind of debated. A fact is something that can be proven to be true or untrue. So there's a flying spaghetti monster at the back end of the moon that will disappear the moment that will disappear over to, I don't know, Io or something, the moment you try to look for him there, and will then disappear somewhere else. I mean, you can't prove that to be right or wrong, so that's not a fact. It's a statement of some sort, but it's not a fact. My sweater's green is a fact. It's an untrue fact, because my sweater's not green, but it is a fact. Although I still fucking disagree with the whole goddamn statement. Sounds way too much like True Lies, doesn't it? So just the fact that these statements were apt to arouse indignation in others, combined with the fact that they hold that they, being the courts, hold that the woman ES could not have made these statements for any other reason than to defame the Prophet of Islam and to claim that he was not worthy of worship, it's perfectly okay to convict her in front of a criminal court. Right, so the court found in conclusion that the instant case domestic court carefully balanced the applicant's right to freedom of expression with the rights of others to have their religious feelings protected and to have religious peace preserved in Austrian society. And that is one of the goddamn kickers. The rights of others to have their religious feelings protected. That just shows what happens when you frame human rights and other rights in a positive manner, and then you give a bunch of overbearing asshats like this even the slightest bit to say about things. It's completely insane. The right of others to have their religious feelings protected. I mean, even if they had such a right, what the hell? Why is the European court? Why are criminal courts involved in protecting people's feelings? Is all other crime fixed to such an extent that that is the best thing that these fuckers have to do? Really? Really? I mean, a case like, jeez, just gonna keep going. The court held further that even in a lively discussion, it was not compatible with Article 10 of the Convention to pack incriminating statements into the wrapping of an otherwise acceptable expression of opinion, and claimed that this rendered passable those statements exceeding the permissible limits of freedom of expression. So they're saying that those are so they have, well, I mean, they're correct by the legal fucking definition because they're the goddamn court. Of course, these are incriminating statements because you're the fucking court and you said they were incriminating statements. You motherfuckers. It's not, I mean, any statement, if they deem any statement that I make right now, just any singular statement, to be an incriminating one, then they can say that I did the exact same thing. They can accuse me of the exact same goddamn crime of wrapping incriminating statements into an otherwise acceptable expression of opinion. So in the last part here is, lastly, since Miss S. we were to pay a moderate fine, and that fine was on the lower end of the statutory range of punishment, the criminal sanction could not be considered as disproportionate under these circumstances, and given the fact Miss S. made several incriminating statements, yeah. The court considered that the Austrian courts did not overstep their wide margin of appreciation in the instant case when convincing Mrs. S of disparaging religious doctrines. Overall, there had been no violation of Article 10. The judgment is only available in English. We'll go over that at a later date. So, this is absolutely insane. the level of insanity will become even damn clearer, and everything that you're getting an inkling of here will become even clearer when we head into the case law notes and into the judgment itself. The judgment itself contains some information that that's only there, that one would think that they would include in the press statements. Like, for instance, how all of a sudden this woman got pushed in front of a criminal court after having made some statements during a seminar she gave. Alright, before I close this shit off, this last little section here. This stuff is not final. There is apparently a possibility to have this pushed in front of a grand chamber of the courts. It is a matter of public records what the name of the law firm representing ES is. So it would be possible, in theory, for people to reach out to that law firm and figure out if they are planning on doing such a thing or not. And if so, see if we can do anything, even if it's just a, work with public opinion a little bit. Who knows? Glimmer of hope. I thought let's throw that in the middle of at the end of the cancer there. Soft-hearted eventually. I'll try to get through the rest of the shit as soon as I can. Find the goddamn strength to get through it. Again, thank you for your attention and good fucking luck.